Hello, and welcome to the Institute for Government. My name is Matthew Fright, a senior researcher on our devolution team. Thank you for everybody in the room joining us today, and for those online, for our event, Local Government Reorganisation and Public Service Delivery, What are the Options and Challenges? Thank you also to Norse Group for sponsoring the event. On the panel today, I'm delighted to be joined by Justin Galliford from Norse Group. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you.
And also several local government experts. Joining us online, we have Rachel Joyce, the Assistant Chief Executive for Local Engagement at North Yorkshire Council, and formerly Assistant Chief Executive of a District Council in North Yorkshire. Welcome, Rachel. We also have Liz Elliott, who's a Deputy Chief Executive for Transformation at Harborough District Council and was formerly Head of Finance at Wellingborough District Council. Welcome. And we also have Professor John Denham, Research Fellow and Director of the Centre for English Identity and Politics at the University of Southampton, and among his many accolades, former Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government from 2009 to 2010.
Thank you.
Welcome, John. I'm very pleased to be launching a report published yesterday in partnership with Norse Group, which outlines the challenges and options facing local leaders as they reorganise district councils and local public services. After providing a brief overview of the main findings from the report, we'll move into a facilitated discussion with the panellists, who will share their reflections on the themes coming from the report and broader thoughts on how to make a success of local government reorganisation. We'll then be opening the floor to questions both in the room and those online. So if you're joining us virtually, please submit your questions via Slido using the panel next to the screen. So now let's delve into the report. In producing this paper, my aim was to engage senior officers who'd led through earlier rounds of local government reorganisation to generate evidence-based guidance on how local leaders can make a success of the merger of district council functions. As many of us are aware, last December, the government launched an ambitious new round of local government reorganisation, inviting all county and district councils and some small unitary authorities to develop proposals for reorganisation. The scale of this local government reorganisation programme cannot be understated. The changes will affect almost 2 in 5 of England's residents and will be the largest LGR wave in England since 46 unitary authorities were established in the 1990s. Coming after more than 15 years of financial strain, with local areas grappling with budgetary and staffing pressures, this will be a marked challenge for the sector. Through this initiative, the government aims to simplify council structures, transform service delivery, and increase efficiency by cutting duplication, or in their words, they aim for clearer, more sustainable local government structures that unlock crucial efficiency savings and ensure more resources are directed to the front line. But establishing new unitary authorities that are capable of delivering safe and legal services is a major undertaking. And for many, the burning priority will be vesting day. That's the formal day that the new council takes on responsibilities and must deliver all services. And as one interviewee said in the course of the research, staff were shattered on day one. It is a very big task. But as the report also illustrates, although the shell of a new unitary authority will be established on that day, the work doesn't stop there. Experience shows that many of the district services, such as waste collection, planning and housing, and the broader council corporate functions will still be administered on the former footprint of the outgoing councils. As one interviewee put it, on day one we had multiple IT systems, multiple HR systems, you name it, that's what we had. So if LGR is to function as a genuine catalyst for public service reform, as intended by central government, local areas will have to face 2 further hurdles. First, they'll need to integrate business units and aligned services, a process that can take many years to achieve. And second, they'll need to initiate transformation programmes which will improve outcomes for residents. So let's take waste management, everyone's favourite topic. As one interviewee said on day one, so we had different collection boxes, different ways of picking up, different ways of recycling different things. Some could recycle, some had green waste services, some had free green waste services. Like many district council services, these are highly visible to residents And the public expects services to be delivered fairly and consistently and won't be satisfied with a postcode lottery over a protracted basis. So new authorities have to merge relevant policy teams, they have to devise new policies, phase out existing services, procure new facilities to deliver against these broader policy aims like better recycling and delivering towards net zero. One interviewee, for instance, estimated it would take 5 to 7 years after vesting day for a unified waste management system. So the report lays out many considerations for local leaders as they navigate these changes, including how the chosen footprint for an area affects an area's harmonisation strategy, how the factors that local leaders need to balance when merging district councils' functions, what lessons they might be able to learn from earlier rounds of local government reorganisation, and how this may present an opportunity to examine new contracting opportunities. I think the one thing, if I would say to emphasise to the audience, is if there's one lesson that shines through is that many interviewees said start early. So it's not just right now while we're coming up with footprint discussions, it's starting to think from the very moment, right now, what does services look like over the next 5, 10, 50 years, and start to put in place those collaborations across councils and starting to do as much upstream work as possible to smooth the transition. To draw this summary to a close, I wanted to reflect on the thoughts of one interviewee who said, launching LGR is easy. Merging district functions, decoupling county council functions, and transforming services is when the hard work begins. So now opening this up to the panel, Rachel, I would like to come to you first to talk about some of this hard work that you did in North Yorkshire and ask, how do you think areas can make a success of local government reorganisation?
Thanks, Matthew. Can everybody hear me from North Yorkshire?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent, thank you. So I was reflecting today on the question, how can areas make a success of local government reorganisation? And I think it comes back to one of the points that you just made. Preparation is key. Do not wait for the starting bell. Start your internal preparations now. There'll be a voracious appetite for both data and information, and councils need to be prepared for that. So getting the nuts and bolts really sorted out early on around your contract registers, really simple things, staff lists and HR systems, asset registers, all of those sorts of things, condition surveys, IT systems, making sure that the nuts and bolts in your organisation are ready to go. Really thinking about your staff and their training and putting them in the best position that you possibly can, and support systems being in place. And then the key thing, I think, is leadership. Whichever bid wins, leaders need to quickly draw a line in the sand, collaborate, put their individual things aside and think about how we can all work together in an area to get the best possible outcomes. And like you said, bringing staff together to think about not just what they need to do for vesting day, which is a task in itself, but the vision for that structure and the service moving forward. So there's a huge amount of work to do around that. But whilst maintaining a really strong focus on what you need to do for vesting day in order to deliver. One of the things that was really important to us in North Yorkshire, we're over 8,000 square kilometres in size, and one of our ambitions was to be the largest but most local council. We've got 664 town and parish councils, and a huge geography, and very different in scale and size. So that was one of the key elements that really set our minds for a year and a half, 2 years, in how could we make that a reality? How could we be such a large council in such a large geography, but still feel really local? And my last reflection was to be kind. It's a really difficult process. It's really hard and tough from an individual level for individual leaders going through that, as well as all of the staff teams. So be kind to yourselves, be kind to each other, put in some support systems, get that delivery from the wine company on order on a monthly basis, and look after each other. And they would be my first reflections on today, Matthew.
Thank you for that, Rachel. And now turning to you, Liz, with the same essay question, but conscious that local government organisation has basically chased you around a little bit from Northamptonshire now to Leicestershire. So in your view, how do you make a success of it?
So I would build on what's already been said, but I would say instead of wine, chocolate cake was definitely my source of being kind to myself. I think from my experience, it is a lot to do. It is quite overwhelming when you start. So the sooner you can start to do some of that housekeeping. I listened to a previous London chief exec once say, tidy your sock drawer, keep a nice tidy sock drawer. So if you've got a messy sock drawer, tidy your sock drawer now, make sure that you're ready and that your organisation is ready. But equally, I would say get to know your organisation well, so that when you start to advocate for your communities, for your residents and for your staff, that you are in a position of strength of knowing what you want and what you will accept and what you won't accept. Because everybody will be competing as you're coming together. There will be legacy dreams that want to be left for over the next couple of years. If they add value to your residents and to your staff and to the wider place, absolutely keep doing what you're doing. But be true to yourself and make sure that what you're doing is positive for the outcome for the future. Don't mourn I did have to mourn the past when I got made redundant, but that's, I've moved on. And actually, in reflection of that, you do need to accept that change is a difficult thing, but actually you can get through change as long as you prepare. So preparing your staff for change, being change ready, isn't just about tidying your sock drawer, it's about tidying your mental health. It's about getting strong relationships in, ready, because it will be tough, it will be challenging. And if you can build those now, you will absolutely set the foundations for the future and success.
Thank you very much. And the same essay question to you, John. How would you make a success of local government reorganisation?
Well, I'm not a practitioner, so I can be much more theoretical than everybody else. I have to say the paper is brilliant. I think it's probably a work of plagiarism. I think that what Matthew did was he got hold of the detailed briefing that Treasury officials would have provided to the Chancellor of the Exchequer before she announced local government reorganisation last autumn. Because clearly, nobody would have encouraged a minister to make that announcement without understanding everything that's in the pamphlet, would they? And certainly they wouldn't have said, I've got a consultant's report here saying I can save 2 billion, oh, I'll have some of that. So, I mean, it is a stark document to read. And I'm aware that what I might seem quite theoretical, given that you've outlined the processes potentially driving towards the lowest common denominator solution in many areas if we're not careful. It's also worth recognising that the pressures on the leaders of existing councils, there are also the ones to create strategic authorities. And strategic authorities that are meant to hit the ground running with spatial development strategies, local growth strategies, transport strategies and skills strategies. It's the same group of people that we're talking about, so a daunting agenda. In terms of what you'd like to think people can incorporate in what they do, I'm going to mention 3 things. One is actually to try to develop a vision of the type of local government, the type of local democratic state that you want to deliver within an area. It's not helped at the moment because the government haven't shared that vision. But the government is, for example, mentioning increasingly total place, the idea of place-based public service budgets that break down local barriers. It seems to me the sort of local authority you will design if you think the future is total place is going to be quite different in its skill set and its organisation to one if you have an assumption of the continuation of siloed services. So that, I think, is one challenge, and I hope people will try and move in that sort of direction. The second one is really difficult, and it's boundaries, and the perhaps default assumption that you do this by pushing existing councils together to make bigger ones. As a young councillor, I was on the South Hampshire structure plan in the 1980s. The district council boundaries then were the same as they are now. As a result of the structure plan, we reshaped the physical geography of South Hampshire to try to create unitaries out of a geography that was settled before the South Hampshire structure plan is really difficult because they won't fit. And the growth plans and the spatial development strategies will further shape the physical footprint. So there is a need, I think, to try to be looking for the boundaries that will fit the areas that we expect to create over the next 20 or 30 years, not to make the best we can out of boundaries that were created 50 years previously. A huge challenge, which I think is important. And the third thing I think is and what Rachel said was very interesting, how you can build empowerment rather than consultation into this process. I mean, people are going to lose 90% of their councillors. And if the sort of engagement we have with local communities is, if you don't mind me saying so, a certain type of local authority consultation, people are not going to feel empowered and put at the heart of it. So I think looking at the places that have confronted those questions and come up with the ways of doing that is enormously important. There's a huge amount of innovative democratic practice in district councils at the moment and in unitaries and counties, but it's a body of expertise that could easily be just let slip through the fingers in this.
Thank you very much. And Justin, same essay question to you. How do you think local authorities can go about making a success of this?
Thanks, Matthew. I mean, I think some really interesting points have been covered so far, but I really do believe that it's about the people. You know, it's people that make local government what it is, and it's the people that transfer into new organisations that are going to drive the change that's needed. So of course, you know, as we've touched on, in order to get the best out of people who are going to be, let's say, battle-weary when they get to this position, and may have all supported different options, you know, to unify them, you need a really clear vision. And you have to contextualise that in the journey they're going on. One of the things the report touches on very well, I think, is the need for a real change management plan, but, you know, let's call that a project plan, and a kind of senior responsible officer, someone that's driving the relevant elements of a very complicated journey, which may take several years. But ultimately, it's got to be hinged to a clear vision. Why are we going to keep getting out of bed, maybe disassembling some of the infrastructure we've spent much of our careers putting together to do something different? And of course, you know, how do we take communities on that journey? You know, and there's some really good points made. I think one of the things I would say is when we're designing what these solutions look like, you've got to think about it in the context of some of the points made about, are we embedding at this point in our journey as we aim to our vision, or are we transforming? They're very different things. You might call embedding safe and legal, and that's a bit of a sort of bland catch-all, but getting it ready on day one. But everybody has to understand this is the launch point from which we drive forward. And I think what's really important is that when we talk about culture, local authorities, you will all know and appreciate, like any organisation, have their own culture. And that's not just about political colour, it's about the people that run those organisations, have spent their whole careers there, and the way in which the community interacts with those organisations as well. So I think that kind of draws me to something else we should really think about, which is the supply chain. Now, although we're a LATCO, we're the largest owned LATCO in the country, and we work...
Perhaps, sorry, can we describe what a LATCO is for those who may not know?
Of course, yeah, a local authority trading company. So we're wholly owned by Norfolk County Council. We deliver services for them, but we also work around the country in partnership with other authorities. So we're part of a supply chain, and we do facilities management. A classic example is waste for district councils. And that's really important, that you engage with the supply chain at that kind of front end, very practical level. But of course, there's another part of the supply chain, which is the local community groups that councils work with, and district councils in particular are very good at those strong connections. You have to make sure you take those organisations on the journey of transformation, because they have great connectivity with communities. And indeed, when we think about vision and really driving culture, they will be conduits to developing and evolving and communicating that culture and the values of the new organisation. So there's a number of different complicated things you've really got to pull together, I think, in order to get really successful transformation. And this is a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, the paper outlines these two timelines, and we were chatting beforehand. They might be conservative. Evidence shows that might be a bit conservative. So you're talking about, 5 years plus. That's not for the faint-hearted. So that really strong vision and people is really, really important.
Couldn't agree more. And actually taking that vision point and coming back to Rachel, I wanted to sort of draw more on the North Yorkshire experience to see what have you found to be the main opportunities that have come from this process of merging district council functions, and I suppose really what have been the main benefits in North Yorkshire of having a new unitary authority?
So I would say, and I won't take credit for this, so I rang a couple of our assistant directors who run previous district services, the AD of housing and the AD of leisure and culture, and asked them what their kind of reflections were. Savings is clearly one of them. So we've made £60 million in savings in the first 2 years of becoming a unitary, and there will be further transformational savings to come. But beyond that, and that's just the number, what they came back to me with was things like scale, more resilience, more capacity, the ability for staff to have better structures, so there's more opportunities for staff. There's also a single conversation around the service, which is really important, and a louder voice, both nationally, regionally, and locally. Lots of efficiencies, but the one thing that they said, and it's and I was a borough council director before I joined North Yorkshire Council, that the ability to get things done and to collaborate across a single council, so social care integration into housing and across into other services, has been so much easier within a unitary than it was previously in the two-tier system. And as a former borough council worker, I'm quite saddened by that, because we worked really hard to try and make those collaborations work. But for some reason, being under a single roof with a single voice and working across services has come out loud and clear as one of the clearest opportunities.
And there's been a lot of talk in the press recently about cost savings. How have you found that in terms of what your expectation was, and are you actually delivering overall cost reductions at the moment?
So our business case set out that we could make savings between 30 and 70 million, I think it was, from a local government reorganisation. We've delivered just over 60 million. And there's more to come. That 60 million was from the convergence phase, and we're just moving into sort of transformation at the moment. So yeah, the savings are there, and they are at the level that we thought they would be there. They're at the top end. We're nearing the top end of what our business case stated, and will exceed expectations, we believe, over the next 2 to 3 years.
And your experience has been very much the, I suppose, really docking the district councils into a county council. But Liz, you've had quite different experience at your side, which has been the breaking up of a county council and reconstructing new unitary authorities around that. I suppose what would be quite interesting to know is, what's your main advice at the moment in Leicestershire, drawing on the Northamptonshire experience you had previously?
I would say, as I stated earlier, make sure that you keep the end user and those vulnerable people that we're talking about from an adult social care and children's point of view, but equally transport, splitting a transport contract in half is absolutely horrendous sometimes. It can take a long time, and there are multiple different, you talk about supply chain, transport supply chain is really, really difficult. So think about trying to structure it so that obviously safe and legal is really important to get, because we need to protect the vulnerable. We need to make sure that service continuity, and equally that those users know who they're going to, and making sure that that is a focus for the new unitaries as they come in. I think that if you can get consistency across from the old to the new, that's great, but actually there is an opportunity to think about how can we improve outcomes then as part of that. So splitting, in Northamptonshire, we created a children's trust under direction from central government to do that. So we didn't split all of children's services, we kept them as a children's trust, and that has now actually improved outcomes for children in Northamptonshire, which is brilliant. It is likely, I suspect, that it will go back at some point from being a children's trust, potentially back into the 2 unitaries. So for me, I think keeping a view that it will be difficult. There is a lot of data, there's a lot of people also, you can't, data protection issues, personal information. There will be hurdles that you need to get through, but they aren't insurmountable hurdles. And that's when, again, if you start to prepare early, if you start to have those conversations, if you can think about, and we talked about here, adult social care and housing starting to link in. You can link into the NHS and transfer of care from hospitals and making sure that people are not delayed in that. So if you can get your systems in place now, and then a structured programme, that is what's come back to what Justin was saying, absolutely make sure those, we call them critical products in Northamptonshire, and in our engine room, there were hundreds of post-its with critical products on, making sure we didn't miss anything. It's a real good structure, but keep the vision of being able to improve outcomes for those individuals whilst maintaining services as you go through, I think is really key.
Thank you, Liz. And you've raised several sort of questions about sort of the contracting and the challenges around that. Justin, I was wanting to come to you to sort of say, well, obviously the LGR will affect residents and the local area, but obviously for delivery partners, this is a very big thing. So what's the delivery, what are you needing as a service provider from the local government sector and government more generally at the moment to smooth through this process?
I mean, I think it's a very interesting space, because when we think about the example of aggregation, really what you need to understand is, what is your customer going to look like in terms of shape? What's it going to absorb potentially, or indeed what will be disaggregated, and how do you fit into their structure and their strategy, really? If you take the example of something like waste, you could have normally a number of districts. It's in the example where it aggregates up with a county to form a new unitary. You've got different services on day one being delivered potentially in different ways, and you need to harmonise that. The challenge, I think, for the sector and suppliers is understanding really what it is you want as a new authority. So what are the timescales? How much do I need to do in order to get that done for you? And what are the priorities? Are we just embedding or transforming? And, that's a really important point, because what you will need to be doing, I would presume, is talking to suppliers saying, we want to harmonise this service, so at least things are coterminous, then we can drive forward. That's quite a big challenge, and if you don't think it through and really communicate well with the supply chain and the market, what will happen is people will price risk in, and your price will go up. I think the other thing that's really important is very clear communication as a sector with critical supply chain about what's happening, because again, given the state of public finance in general and a lot of uncertainty around reorganisation, certainly I think what we see some of the larger players in the public sector supply chain a bit nervous, moving away a little bit, investing time and energy somewhere else. That's not good for the sector when it's at a critical point of transformation. So we need to make sure that all of our representative bodies are really engaging and putting out a positive message about the opportunities, the long-term opportunities for helping the sector through what's going to be a period of significant challenge. And I made the point earlier about working with those other elements of the supply chain. That's really important. Don't forget the third sector that does excellent work. There may be small financial relationships with them, small transactions for us, but really important to a small charity. So who are they? Are we making sure we understand what they do and we keep them onboarded and we keep the cash moving? Because you draw it out at the point out in the report very well. Really important to keep in the lifeblood of some of that work alive, whilst you're thinking about your longer-term strategy and how you need it to evolve.
Certainly, and the risks for disruption of services through small providers is quite high unless a careful focus is given to that. I suppose most of the discussion so far has been sort of focused on the quite particular challenges for individual councils, but I suppose, John, as we take a step back and think about broader government aims, obviously the English Devolution Community Empowerment Bill is going through Parliament. How do you think this local government reorganisation agenda may impinge on these sort of broader government aims?
Well, it's implicit in the bill and the white paper that you have local authorities in a fit condition, not just to deliver local services, but to be leaders of public service reform. And the difference between what will happen at strategic mayoral authority level and local authorities hasn't yet been articulated as clearly as you would like by the government. But it's very clear that if you don't have a resilient, reasonably well-resourced and well-run local government sector, a very big part of the government's vision of devolution doesn't work. Okay, so devolution cannot be interpreted simply as those things that mayors and strategic authorities will do in the future. So there's a risk there, I think, to what the government wants to do in the large areas of the country where this is taking place, certainly. The thing I'd throw into that previous discussion, and I can be shot down by the people who've got more expertise, but a lot of the discussion that's out there in public, and maybe not amongst professionals, rather assumes that you have your unitaries and you have your county-district relationships, and you just end up with a new set of self-contained unitaries with a set of functions. It's not obvious that that needs to be the case, surely. In areas of the public service where people are market makers because they're commissioners, market shapers because they coordinate things, and market providers because they run some of the services, it isn't always obvious to me that all of that coordination has to fragment as you establish the new unitaries. That is not possible. Now, you can tell me this doesn't work, but it doesn't seem obvious why a level of coherence across crucial services of that sort can't be maintained and might be more sensible in some areas than others. And that would be particularly true, I think, in areas where, as Greater Manchester are trying to do at the moment, they are trying to coordinate the market in various high-cost areas like children's homes and things of that sort, where the individual unitaries simply don't have the resource and the organising capacity. So the mayor is not moving into the business of local authorities so much as coordinating the market. And I think there will be areas in the new unitaries where sensible coordination across the strategic market area to bring as much stability as you can into the market. And maybe it's at that level that the smaller providers get picked up. So I'm just sort of, I get most of my stuff this slightly secondhand. I'm just challenging the suggestion that we're used to unitaries with boundaries around their services, and we're used to county district areas with boundaries around their services, that the new structure of unitaries must all be unitaries with bounded services. Yep.
No, that's a very good point. And before I put this to Rachel and to Liz, I'll just say that we'll take this as the final question as part of this group discussion before coming back to the audience. So please do prepare your questions in the room, and do please keep submitting them online. So perhaps first going to Rachel.
Is this around the boundary question?
And sort of the scope, I suppose, really for coordination and collaboration. And I suppose throwing in a further theme to that, actually, given how vexatious some of the discussions are at the moment, is there a potential that the space for that kind of policy innovation may be squeezed?
I think there'd be a capacity issue and an ability to raise your head up to look outside the local government reorganisation process. I think when you get into it, it's very hard. That was one of our learning points. We became very internally focused, whereas we needed to, one of our key points to people that we're talking to at the moment is to keep some capacity aside to do some of that wider thinking and to look more outward out of your organisation. We went through devolution at the same time and created the combined authority with the City of York at the same time as doing local government reorganisation. So we've kind of been on that journey with the combined authority from inception, and are working our way through how that relationship and together with City of York we can best make for the people of York and North Yorkshire, and that's been a positive journey to date. Wider than York and North Yorkshire, we have lots of our public service organisations that aren't on boundaries with us. So we've got a number of ICBs and all of the health stuff, and none of our boundaries make sense in North Yorkshire, and you would always suggest that if you started again, boundaries would not be drawn in this way. So yes, having those conversations, being very open to those conversations. There is no reason technically, I don't think, why anything should be within one single boundary. There's something for me about leadership and letting go, There's something around control in that, and that if we're all very honest, it's easier when you've got control of a service within your own organisation. So there's something about understanding the size of the prize and what you want to do around that. We're trying to look at prevention in a very different way, bringing in our partners and looking at getting upstream of issues rather than dealing with those in the local authority when they've become when it's no longer prevention. But all of that takes time, all of that takes thought, all of that takes space, and all of that takes capacity. And I think that's incredibly difficult to do when you're trying to fit together the nuts and bolts of LGR together with running business as usual services, because you don't just get taken off to do local government reorganisation. You're running councils and doing local government reorganisation and being restructured and having to go for job interviews and all of the rest of it. So it's, to me, headspace, thought space, and leadership. And yeah, I think there's no reason why not, but I would be very surprised if people were able to give the correct thinking space to that.
And Liz, you want to add anything further to that?
So, well, I echo everything that Richard said, actually, and it is incredibly busy, and you are so in the moment of delivering local government reorganisation that actually you forget that you need to look to the future and to the art of the possible, and what could we do with this. And in hindsight, but perhaps we should have thought about the future more, but actually you are too busy thinking about investing down and the year after to think about that strategic longer term vision. But equally, I would echo to say that there's no reason why we can't do it. The fact that we've now got this opportunity to run devolution and LGR together, we should be putting more time and effort into the Devo and saying, what is the art of the possible? What can we do? What can we gain from a regional focus on this? Why do we have to do adoption locally? Why can't we have a regional adoption agency that covers more than one area? Those type of things we could look at. But again, it comes back to when we were talking earlier, that it doesn't matter what you start talking about now in any meeting, at some point local government reorganisation is going to come into that conversation and distract you along to a different path, and trying to keep that pure path of what that vision might be and the art of the possible is really difficult, because you don't have the headspace, you don't have the capacity, and this is potentially where central government could come in and help and support and give more capacity to give us that direction. And it might be that, and I've written it down, don't embed if you're going to do transformation, because once you've embedded, transformation is twice as hard. Think about where you want to go from transformation, and then let's stage that transformation, and a period of stability is part of that transformation journey, not the end of something and the start of a new. So maybe that strong vision and how we can do that, if it is place-based, again, going forward, let's think about place-based and how we look at geographies now, how we work with whether our boundaries are coterminous or not, whether you want to work on primary care network boundaries, or whether you want to look at how that locality issue, area committees are coming through as quite a strong push, aren't there? Is this, how to keep that local voice while getting that regional strength is a real key issue I think we should put more effort and time into.
Well, it's nice to conclude our panel discussion on the art of the possible, I suppose, really, so we can then come to the audience to hear their reflections on that. We'll be taking questions in batches of 3. So please wait for a microphone to come to you. So we have, just checking the room, we have a gentleman at the back, followed by the 2 gentlemen at the side there, please. Before talking, please, could I ask you to say who you are, what organisation you're from, and keep questions as brief as possible. It allows more time for answers.
Thank you. My name's Neil Merritt. I'm a journalist for a very specific industry title, Materials Recycling World. But building on what the panellists were saying, I was going to ask how they think, or where do we start, if at all, from preventing certain services being deprioritised over others, whether that's waste or social care, or is there inevitably going to be some obvious areas that will have to be priorities in this change or in this devolution of power?
Okay, thank you. And then over to the side.
Yeah, I mean, my name is Arif Azad. I live in Ealing and I'm involved in a local group around local government and, public services. My questions is, yes, about savings. I mean, how they have been made and, I mean, what is their impact going to be on, public, service delivery at a time when they have already been, pared down considerably.
Yep. Thank you.
Hi, Martin Hurst, various hats, but one of them is chairing a public body that the membership of which is councillors from all the unitaries and counties across the south of England. I was going to ask a question about councillors, because we've spoken quite a lot about the transformation, and I've led machinery government changes myself. What we're finding is there's three kinds of issues. So there are some councillors, particularly in districts, who very much feel this is being done to them and are temperamentally disinclined to go along with very much at all, and certainly pushing difficult decisions right. There are other councillors who are positioning themselves in what's going to be an unusually contested election for the new bodies and are therefore perhaps playing a different agenda. And then when the new bodies are set up, there will be councillors who very much want to move forward quickly and make a name for themselves at a time when the officers will be scrabbling just to kind of almost make ends meet and do the things that have to be done. So any tips as to how councillors can best be involved in this?
Thank you very much. So the three questions are, one relating to how to stop services being deprioritised, the savings, what the actual tangible aspects of savings, are they actually feasible given the amount of cutbacks, and in terms of the three different types of councillor agendas that we'll have going on, and what tips can we give to them? So Justin, coming to you first. Which of those you want to take?
So I think just touching on service priorities, obviously there are some services that are absolutely crucial from a legal perspective. There are some that may have been perhaps more discretionary, should we say, but even they've come under pressure. I think in terms of how do you make sure that crucial services are prioritised, it's about having the plan, as we talked about earlier, and whether you're going to embed or transform those, and they become interlinked. So you may need to generate efficiency in one to ensure the sustainability of another. It really comes down to a really solid planning element right from the start, so that we understand what our priorities are, and actually to achieve outcome B, we need to make sure we achieve outcome A. It's about that full vision piece. I think you mentioned MRW and obviously waste. From a district council perspective, bin collection is a big political issue. At county, it's potholes and it's adults. So they're complementary priorities when you think about what a new unitary authority will have to face. And therefore they become interdependent, in my view, in terms of protecting them. Just touching on the point about savings and given the pressures that have already emerged for authorities, I think one of the things we have to recognise is that local authorities have been asked to generate very detailed plans in an extremely short timescale and come up with savings. And I think we central government has to give them some flexibility to move through that as to how they achieve those things. Because for change of this complexity, you can't possibly know all of the different things and levers you can pull to design an efficiency. But I think above all else, it does come down to that point. It's about having the ability and the capability as a team to stand back and redesign services for that intended outcome, for that members of the public, but at the same time looking at how you drive down cost. Thus far, it's a bit simplistic to say it, but there's been kind of salami slicing perhaps from central government on budgets in a fairly regimented systems. That the real opportunity of LGR is the complete service redesign piece, kind of horizontally going across a new authority. And I think the prize is in gripping that, not getting too focused on redesigning what currently exists in form. It's going right back to basics and thinking about that full vision piece. I won't say too much on councillors and democracy because that's not really in my area, so I'll ask someone else to pick one up.
I was going to maybe ask John if you'd be happy to pick up the council piece, drawing on your own personal experience.
Yeah, I'm sure they do feel done to in many cases because they've sort of been done to, really. I think the question is, how do you enthuse and engage? And it's clearly a huge challenge. But I think, I would say this because I was an elected politician. I mean, most people go into politics for the right reason. They actually go in because they want to shape the community they serve. Yes, they want to get elected and they want to do all of those sorts of things. They go into it for the right reason. The way that I would try and do this, I think, is to engage them in that debate about doing local government differently, right? If it's presented to councillors as, we're going to do exactly what we've done up to now, but we're putting a different badge on it, and there's only one council instead of two councils, that is not an inspiring vision to get involved in local government. I think you actually have to say, we've got an opportunity to hear something different. Now, accepting the practical constraints on that, nonetheless, it's quite important that councillors are not confronted with the, yes, all very well, councillor, but you can't do that. Right? All very well, councillor, we've got vesting day. All very well, we've got to do minimum, safe, legal, or whatever. So that stuff may come later. Now, there's going to be a tension there, but I think actually enabling them to think differently about the local government you're creating, which, for a start, means bringing district councillors together from councils that are likely to be in the new unitary, even if those individual councillors aren't, and say, well, how do you work this out across New Forest, Test Valley, Winchester? You know, people who don't necessarily meet each other very much. So allow them to be there. And I would also say, as a politician, thinking about officials, as I was in government or as a councillor, officials and officers need cover from their elected politicians. They need people. There needs to be the discussion where you say, there's a risk there. That would be a brave decision, Minister, that sort of stuff. And the councillor says, I'll have your back on that, because that's the way we should be going. So having the discussion with the elected members that makes them feel part of the process and that they can shape the vision. All right, you won't deliver exactly everything they would want, but if there are elements of the way new authorities work and the way they work together, it's worth doing.
Coming now to you, Liz, there's a couple of extra questions that have come in online that feel free to either pick up the ones from earlier, or there have been some discussions about what does a good consultation phase look like? How do you actually engage the public effectively? So feel free to answer that one as well. There's also a series of questions linked to the different mechanisms for engagement once a new council is established. So, you know, area committees and potentially double devolution, more powers going to the parish level. So if any of those themes also we want to discuss, please do pick them up.
So I will just come back on the councillor thing, because I absolutely agree. If you have confidence as an officer that you've given the advice, it's been taken and a decision's been made, and that that is the right decision for the future, that is absolutely bread and butter for us. We absolutely need people to help and support us and to have our back if we're making, and these will be very challenging decisions, and they won't be decisions that everybody likes. So you need to have that trust and confidence, and that's something that I think that councillors need to build upon. It's difficult, as I talked about change before, councillors going through change. They're effectively might be made redundant if they're not re-elected. We need to appreciate that we are all public servants and that we all have the same goal. We've got different drivers, different ways of delivering that, but we've all got the same goal. We want to improve people's lives. We want to make them better. And if you can keep that focus on, I want to make people's lives better, actually, how am I going to do that? What's my role in this future delivery of improving people's lives, creating community cohesion and empowerment? Think about what you want to do. As I said earlier, know your community and know their needs. Know what you can advocate for them and be a powerful advocate for them. Get involved and be part of that decision-making and forming the future as much or as little as you can be. A lot of councillors have very competing diaries. Some work full-time, some have more commitments than others. They can be more involved, but get involved as much as you can be and be part of that vision for the future. That's what we all do our jobs for, whether it's a councillor or an officer. We do that to make a difference, and just keep that in your mind. Every day I come in and I make a difference to somebody's life. It doesn't matter what that difference is, but we make a difference. So keep that vision and focus of why am I doing this and what do I want to get out of it, to try and keep your motivation to keep going, I would say. With regard to good consultation and public engagement, we all reflect back on projects and should have done comms better. Actually start early, start to build ask people their views on what you are doing. Those views might be very different, but you need to make it true consultation, not just lip service to, oh, tick a box on this and to give me your thoughts. Really try to engage, again, those community and voluntary sectors. The business sector is vital. Make sure that you've got that varied consultation and engagement, and that you've got different methodologies for doing that. We've just in Harborough, we've created, we call it Kev the van, the community engagement vehicle. It's a little vehicle. We go out, it's got a coffee machine in the back, and we go out and we park up in communities and we just say, do you want a coffee? Do you want to chat? What's your problem? What do you want to do? So trying to get out into the community as well, to try and get people's different views, trying to get them enthused about change and that they want to be part of the future is really key to consultation and getting that engagement through as well, I would say. And again, Harborough is a very, very rural area. We've got some market towns, but very rural. Trying to make sure that you don't say, well, it's online, and actually broadband coverage isn't very good, or people are digitally excluded. Make sure that you're looking at various different methods of doing that consultation. We've got a youth council. I've just done a community wellbeing plan for the next 2 years to enhance and create future fit communities in Harborough District. So we're engaging with the youth council and all of our parishes. Really try to get as many different avenues in through as many different ways. And it doesn't have to be, what do you think on the proposal? You can say, what do you think we're doing about that? What do you think about that priority? Why do you think this is important? So different ways of asking the same question as well might help and support getting that engagement.
Now, before I come to you, Rachel, I'm conscious there's a question online that specifically asks about the devolution bill and area committees and more broadly about community engagement. I know that, John, you were keen to say something.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks, Matthew. Part of the work that I've done on the devolution bill, or most of it, has been done with David Lidington, former Conservative Minister. So we deliberately worked together on a cross-party basis. And we have pushed something broader than the current clause, which is about effective area governance, and said there should be a bigger statutory duty for every local authority and indeed strategic authority to have a community empowerment plan, which actually sets out as a statutory document all of the ways the local authorities are going to consult. So it's not an ad hoc process, and which enables you in each area to take into account not only whether you have town and parish councils or not, but the varying capabilities of town and parish councils and those sorts of things. So the current thing seems to be designed for ministers to say every area should have a committee and it should look like this, and the councillor should be leading it. That is only one model. It is not necessarily the best, and it doesn't include the innovative forms of participatory democracy, sortition, and all the rest of it that need to be part of the picture. So we will be lobbying to try and get that into the bill. We'll see how we get on.
Okay, thank you. And so coming to you, Rachel, now, any of those things you want to pick up?
Yeah, that's lovely. So probably the locality and engagement things are very dear to our hearts in North Yorkshire. As I said, we're aiming to be the largest but most local council. So we've had 4 pillars. We decided to go with 4 pillars of local engagement. So that's local services and access, local accountability. So we do have 6 area committees which are politically accountable in their area. Local action, so that's our community partnership network. So we're working towards 30 community partnerships that aren't necessarily led by the council. They are partnerships of the voluntary and community sector, local people, local groups, and local councillors, and then also local empowerment. So we run our double devolution programme to community groups and town and parish councils. Through LGR, we ran what we called a Let's Talk campaign. So our engagement mechanism was called Let's Talk North Yorkshire, Let's Talk Money North Yorkshire, Let's Talk Something North Yorkshire, which we ran both online, QR codes, but critically we had a lot of staff out and about in localities with the paper copies for people to fill in and doing it on the street to get in there. Going back to savings, the majority of our savings that we've taken out to date haven't been around services. They haven't been around cutting services. services. Third-party spend is one of the huge areas of expenditure for local government. So some of our biggest areas, so 12.5 million we've taken out of procurement, 10 million extra income. We've taken 2.5 million out of technology-led projects. So we're not seeing the savings necessarily coming out of cuts. We're seeing that there have been a lot of savings. That 60 million is made up of quite high level savings, and as we're doing the efficiency work and transformation work, there'll be further savings, I'm sure, that come out of services. On the prioritisation of services, we're not seeing that either. What we're seeing is that we have a lack of capacity to run all of the transformation activity within the council. So Waste have presented us, the Waste Service have presented us with their 5-year transformation journey. Leisure have done their leisure investment strategy and their 5-year leisure transformation journey. Every service wants the same capacity from all of the services, and so we're not seeing people being deprioritised. We're struggling to understand how best to prioritise and use our capacity, because it all needs doing, and that's one of the key learning points, I think, for anybody on the call that's going through LGR, is you will need initially additional capacity in all of your core services, HR, IT, finance, all of those support services, to try and do what you're trying to deliver. And then one thing, last point on councillors. We use councillors through the initial LGR on councillor working groups, and actually bringing them together around particular local issues, and how we might want to resolve those and how they can feed into the vision for that, was a really effective way of kind of getting them around a table to collaborate and join in around local government reorganisation and produce some really good work. So I would also advocate for bringing in working groups and extra support around that.
Thank you, Rachel. And the report makes a really strong case for really not neglecting those enabling organisations, emphasising that your back office is your engine for the organisation. But there are also some interesting quotes in there where one former chief executive was told by a council leader saying, "I don't care what you do on the operational stuff, I don't want any of the standards dipping. Residents cannot in any circumstances be affected by these administrative back office changes." So there's a lot of complexities going on here. I have enough time to go for one more round of questions, and I think we'll probably go for 2 and more towards the front. So we have one at this woman at the front, please, and then the gentleman behind afterwards. Thank you.
Hi, sir. I'm Caitlin from the Local Government Chronicle. I sort of want to continue partly about the conversation about councillors. How on earth do you do all this transformation, all this redrawing of lines, when you have politicians who have different ideas of what the best lines are to draw and the best decisions? And how do you make sure those are future-proofed and not that there are some, I guess, other priorities that may be used instead?
Thank you very much.
Whichever.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Nick Golding from the District Councils Network. Your excellent report expresses concern about doing so much reorganisation across so much of the country in one go. It talks about the potential for the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government to be overloaded. I just want to know, how do you think that overloading of the ministry might actually manifest itself? What could be the outcomes of that? And does moots slowing down the timetable, is that a realistic prospect, and what would that bring?
Brilliant. So the first question relating to councillors and the way in which these decisions are being taken, and the second one on the implications for just the scale of this change. Does anybody particularly want to come in on those 2 topics, looking online to Rachel and...
I can come in on the councillor
Certainly.
one, just to working in a council that changes administration every 4 years. I'm working currently in a council that is under a coalition administration. It changes every day anyway, and we're used to dealing with different priorities and different opinions with councillors. A leader can change and then your direction can change. So we are used to it and hardened to that sort of ability, but you do need to be adaptable and you do need to be resilient, but you also need to be open-minded as well. And it comes back to, and I would say this because I'm an accountant at heart, where's the evidence? Show me the evidence. Where's the data, the proof that you need to make this decision and this is the right decision, and document it so that you've got that. You've always then, as we said earlier, if you've got each other's backs as a councillor and an officer, if you're working towards that same outcome, then I think that just making sure you've got that evidence and you've given the advice as an officer, that councillors have open minds to that advice and to change as well. If you come to the right decision through the right process, then the right decision's a right decision for me. Thank you.
And perhaps I'll then take up the answer to the question about what does this scale look like in practical terms. I think there's an element of known unknown about this, that if you look at recent local government reorganisations, they've been 2 or 3 undergoing at the same time. There hasn't been sort of this system-wide change in quite a while, and that's why in the report we've encouraged central government to be having conversations with Northern Ireland, for instance, and the way in which there was a whole-scale reorganisation of unitary authorities there to better understand what are the tensions, what is different about the delivery of something that you're dealing with more than 21 areas that potentially could be bisected, turning into more than 42 areas, say. That is a significant amount of change, let alone getting the statutory orders through Parliament. There's just a high volume of work, and there's a question about whether this will be bespoke enough and tailored enough to the quite local challenges that might be coming through. Some of the interviews with statutory officers emphasise about the level of effort that they had to go through to monitor the statutory orders as they're going through, for responding to errors and changes that need to occur en route. So it is a lot of change. It's a relatively condensed schedule. So like I say, this is very much the territory of a known unknown. I couldn't put into more specifics actually what this looks like in terms of the capacity changes. I think one of the things, though, talking to people in the sector is as well reflecting on the fact that there have been some real intellectual big figures in the department who historically experienced a large amount of this at a systematic level, and it's whether that level of depth of knowledge is also out there. So for that reason, again, looking at the expert panel that the government has brought forward, really encouraging the department to try and encourage it to go back to those retirees, engage with those people who have experienced such significant change previously, and baking that into the decision making, and if necessary, if it doesn't have capacity, thinking about going out and expanding, particularly in things like programme management, to make sure that councils are supported through this process. I'm going to bring this to a close, but just wanted to check through with Justin to see whether he had any sort of concluding and reflecting remarks before we do.
I think all I'd say is that the report I think gives some really practical advice and suggestions about how you face some of the challenges, but you also have to look at the broader context of why we're doing it. There's been so much focus on LGR, and of course ultimately LGR is the route to devolution. Not everybody sits in the DPP, but nonetheless this is about devolution. And when you really think about devolution and what government seeks to achieve, I think the challenge is huge, but the prize is huge as well. And in fact, I think people will look back on this point in history, and it will be a moment in history, depending on how we shape the future. They're not causally linked, but when you think about the challenge we face as a country economically, about the desire to devolve, to give more local power through strategic authorities, and you think about where we sit on the world stage, and the fact that ultimately our democracy, our model of democracy, has been heralded around the world in the past. We are, the mother of parliaments. I think there's a significant chance that what's going to happen over the next few years will really be an important part in the history that children and grandchildren will talk about how we take our next stage forward as a country.
Thank you. Well, I suppose concluding on a positive note and thinking about the potential that these changes bring is a very positive way to finish the discussion. Thank you all, both in the line and in the room and online, for the engaging questions. And it is not unsurprising that a topic on local government reorganisation has overrun and that there are significant more questions to be asked. I'm sure this is going to be a conversation we keep having. There will be a video and sound recording from this session on the IFG website and YouTube shortly after the event. If you cannot wait that long, you can go online now and get a copy of our new paper. I will do another promotion of it. Reorganising District Councils and Local Public Services, Challenges and Options. Also, just want to do a quick plug for a couple of upcoming IFG events. The upcoming Productivity Pitches number 8 on the 23rd of October. We'll have somebody from the Local Government Association talking about the peer challenge and service transformation. And please keep an eye out for the autumn programme of devolution events, looking at our Devo Lab series, looking at the way in which lessons can be learnt from existing strategic authorities and the good practices occurring, particularly in transport and investment. Thank you once again to Norse Group for sponsoring this report and this event. And finally, thank you, panellists.